Now, assuming the live broadcast position, check in sound. There seems to be some kind of connectivity, although it's extremely poor, as it shall be, because there is a curfew in my great city of Istanbul. We'll start in a few minutes. Please, I am speaking as I speak, and if you don't hear me or don't see me, please send a message so I can try to solve the problem. Not that I can, but I will try. This shall take about 20 minutes, not solving the problem, but my presentation or my live broadcast. And I want to thank our loyal audience of 5 people, including my aunt and my nieces, for watching our broadcasts. In a few minutes, we shall start. Yes, we are now officially stuck in our homes. The curfew is supposed to last until Sunday midnight, but I don't know. It might last much longer than that. It should last much longer than that, because we are not good in terms of preserving social distance and remaining holed up in our homes. And it's going to get much more difficult, because if you see the background, the sun is shining, the birds are chirping, and the cats are flirting. I am reminded by a member of our audience to keep this G-rated because children might be watching. So I shall select my words and phrases much more carefully from now on. But of course, right now, the temperature in Istanbul is roughly 15 degrees Celsius. But I'm mindful of my compatriots in cities like Adana, Antalya, Mersin, Gaziantep, where soon the temperature would be 40 degrees Celsius in the shade. And they'll go crazy if they're locked up in their homes. So that's a serious problem. And if we don't lick this virus up in a month or so, it is going to be much more difficult going into the summer. There are several medical trials in progress for inoculations and drugs, but none is confirmed. Some do help in a small number of patients, but there's a protocol for approving these drugs. None of them have really met the standard yet. So the only hope, short of a complete stay-home order, is, the summer season bringing better immunity to people or killing the virus. Okay, yeah, it's 2:58 p.m. and I can start making the official announcements required by YouTube. I want to welcome all of you to a live broadcast of Real Turkey channel, which informs people in the language of English from Turkey about economics, finance, politics, and the business. Nowadays, mostly about coronavirus. I am Atilla Yeşilada, your host. Hopefully, once this coronavirus outbreak ends, we shall have guests and other hosts as well. Today's topic is Mr. Erdogan's twin challenges. One, of course, his capacity, the crises, health crises. Secondly, Turkey's growing dollar shortage. Well, essentially, reserves are running down quite rapidly, which is actually quite common for most developing nations or emerging markets. And Turkey is actively seeking swap lines or swap credits from G20, IMF, Fed. And I want to answer the question whether these efforts can be successful. And finally, I want to analyze how Mr. Erdogan's approval ratings and potentially his political career will be affected by the choices he makes. Okay, it's now 3 p.m. Istanbul time, and I can start talking about the progress of the corona outbreak in Turkey. As of Friday night, we had 47,000 cases, which I'm afraid to report is probably an undercount. This is not necessarily a criticism of the government or an insinuation that data is being concealed. There might be some efforts to do so. But in many countries, including very developed countries, we see a confusion in the medical community about identifying the causes of death, or some people dying at their homes without knowing they had COVID-19. But I base my assertion on reports from independent newspapers who have talked to medical associations in several cities, all of which claim that their caseloads are much bigger than the province by province reporting nightly announced by the Ministry of Health. In fact, there was another article in The Independent, the Turkish version, where a convict, a prisoner, was certified. Well, he died, and the death certificate said he died of gangrene. Actually, he died of COVID-19. These things happen. And private hospitals don't want to admit that their patients died of COVID-19 because there is a stigma attached to it. Anyhow, so the reality is probably worse than the official numbers, which is not really something that should surprise anyone who is studying this matter. But even if we have truly 47,000 cases, if this two-day curfew doesn't slow down the spread of the virus, by Friday or Saturday next week, the Turkish health system will be dealing by 75 to 80,000 cases. So the question is a two-day curfew enough? In my view, and I read the medical reports as much as possible, it isn't. First of all, the curfew was announced around 7 or 8 p.m., so 4 hours before it came into effect, which meant there was a mad rush to buy the groceries and necessities and alcohol, of course. And in the ensuing havoc, social distancing measures were not necessarily observed. In fact, it is very difficult to observe social distancing measures when you are beating the hell out of people who are trying to step in front of the line. So, yeah, these things really happened. I'm sorry. That's gallows humor, but they did happen. So probably infections could soar instead of decline because of the two-day curfew. Again, even if this two-day curfew is successful in terms of reducing the cases in the 31 large cities, it's in effect, it is based on a false theory that these cities are the focus or nexus of the virus. Check the health ministry website. I don't know if it is in English, but you will see a map with lighted dots, and the virus is present across Anatolia. In fact, as of Friday, across Anatolia, almost even geographical spread, 185 townships with a total population of 211,000 were under quarantine, under lockdown. That's a very small portion of the population, but is that the virus is thoroughly mixed with the population, and it will take nothing short of a national curfew a la Italy, Spain, and New York City, I believe, uh, to solve the problem. So, my viewpoint is that Mr. Erdogan would fail that challenge. Now, of course, I'm not dismissing the possibility that by Sunday the curfew will be extended. And in fact, I would applaud Mr. Erdogan if he does so. Perhaps he didn't want to frighten people and cause even a bigger rush for necessities. But on Sunday, around noon or early evening, we might hear that the curfew is extended for another week. That would be the right decision. If he doesn't, if the curfew is lifted, I anticipate the 2-day curfew would not make a significant difference to the daily progress of cases. And in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, in the absence of a miracle, the Turkish health system would have difficulty coping with the caseload. There's another problem on which I shall not dwell for long, but it needs to be mentioned. A new vector for the introduction of the virus in Turkey is the Idlib province in Syria. I read reports from Idlib every day. Of course, reporting is extremely vague, but Doctors Without Frontiers have reported that currently they are treating 6 patients who do show corona symptoms. That's not necessarily they are, corona positive because there are no test kits there. But there's a strong suggestion that corona has reached Idlib, and with roughly 1 million refugees at the Turkish border huddled up, there is a strong presumption that some of them would flee to the Turkish side and thus bring new infections. $60 billion. Its gold reserves don't count because they are kept in warehouses or vaults in Turkey. For these reserves to be accepted as international collateral for any kind of dollar swap or dollar transactions, they need to be warehoused in London or New York. So unless they sell their gold in Turkey, that doesn't count. The international standard to measure a country's adequacy of reserves is that they should be equal to 1 year's worth of foreign debt payments. Turkey's foreign debt payments or foreign service in the next 12 months is roughly $170 billion. So Turkey is already way below the norms, like 2 standard deviations. Moreover, there's a capital flight from all emerging markets. I just read the International Institute of Finance report today. They expect capital flows to emerging markets to decline by 53% this year. And portfolio flows, that's financial capital, which is the only kind we get, is going to decline in net terms. So there, funds will withdraw money from emerging markets this year. And that is already happening in Turkey. Since the beginning of the year, roughly $6.5 billion of stocks and bonds have been sold by foreign financial investors. There's another problem. Turkish savers and corporates are buying dollars. Over the last 2 weeks, the dollar deposits or hard currency deposits of Turkish retail investors have begun declining. But it's not clear whether this is because they are spending it since their incomes declined, or I don't think they're switching to TL. I think the decline in dollar deposits reflects that they're withdrawing their dollars from the bank. They may have a confidence issue with the government. They may think they need to keep their money at home just in case there's a long lockdown and they can't, have access to their banks. But in any case, Turkey has a trade deficit despite the fall in oil prices. Turkey has foreign debt payments. Uh, you know, Financial capital is fleeing the country, and retail are preferring hard currency to Turkish currency. So clearly, something in this equation must change. Otherwise, the central bank will run out of hard currency deposits, and the central bank is the last lender to banks. So Turkey is actively seeking swap lines, which is something Fed initiated. Fed takes your currency and gives you dollars equal to its exchange rate for, say, 6 months. And Reuters and Bloomberg reported Turkish authorities are having conversations with both the White House, Fed, IMF, even G20 to establish such swap lines. But unfortunately, so far there has been no progress, and it's very unlikely that there is going to be progress. And I'll tell you why. For the United States institutions, that's Fed and American Treasury, the sine qua non, that's the prior condition, would be Turkey to mothball S-400 anti-missile systems. So far, Turkey has not said it would do so. So until a deal on that has been reached, no swap lines. Secondly, Fed's own rules makes it very clear that before it can swap dollars with another central bank, it must be assured of its independence. And our central bank, God bless its beautiful soul, is anything but independent of Mr. Erdogan's authority. And G20, I don't think they have official swap lines. And the amount, if they did, that they would be able to lend to Turkey is very small. I mean, Qatar has a swap line with Turkey. Qatar is a very good ally and a relatively rich country, but the swap line is only $3 billion. And $3 billion is what central bank spends in a single week. We need something like $15 to $20 billion. And that money could only come from IMF or Fed. But IMF too, even if it wants to, probably can't give that much money to Turkey without a formal standby loan, because such swap lines or standby loans must be approved by the board of directors, where United States and NATO member countries are in majority, if I'm correct. And they would probably veto a loan unless Turkey improves the relationship with the United States and NATO, or as I've said, mothballs S-400s. So there too, Mr. Erdogan is facing a challenge, and he doesn't seem to comprehend the basic facts that I've just listed. So let's cut to the chase. What's going to happen? I have read several March polls. People are generally content with Mr. Erdogan's leadership during this crisis. Approval of his handling of crises runs as high as 65%. According to a Metropole agency, his personal approval ratings jumped as well. But these could change very quickly if he fails these two challenges. So it is Turkey's fate, public health, as well as his personal political fortunes that are involved in the stake. I would presume that within a week or two, he would understand that he needs a complete shutdown of the economy and a prolonged curfew to get to the bottom of the health crisis. I am not so sure that he would break his own principles and his personal distaste of IMF to reconcile to a standby. And without a standby, Turkey will always be at the precipice of a currency shock. That is a sudden and very large depreciation that boosts the inflation and deals a blow to the corporate balance sheets by increasing their financial obligations in FX terms. To be perfectly honest with you, if you're watching this as a businesswoman or as a fund manager, Turkey is not safe until we receive very strong signals from Ankara that it is ready to discuss standby with the IMF. And how much time does Turkey have? As I've said, 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, if the people realize that the corona outbreak is not slowing down or plateauing, as the medical term goes, and Turkey is not stabilizing the currency, Mr. Erdogan would face a significant political fallout. And we would be talking about not only currency stability, but political stability as well. I wish him luck, honestly. Okay, thank you very much. It has been 21 minutes. This has been a live broadcast of Real Turkey Channel by your loving host, Atilla Eşlada. Wherever you may be on this planet, or even if you are from another star system, please stay home and stay safe. And don't forget to share this broadcast with anyone else who may be interested in the affairs of Turkey. Have a good day now.